Hello and welcome to Two Car Pros. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to change the thermostat in a 2008 Dodge Caravan with a 3.3 liter V6. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is check and make sure the engine is nice and cool. We can do that by grabbing the upper radiator hose and squeezing it. If it feels like it's under pressure or you can't squeeze it, that means the system is under pressure and it's hot. And if you open the radiator cap underneath pressure, it will geyser in your face and burn you. So make sure this has plenty of give, like this does. See how easy it is to squish it? Yeah. That means it's not under pressure and we can open up the radiator cap. So here is the radiator cap. We can go ahead and remove this because we know the system is not under pressure. And now we can move on. Okay, so right here is the drain port or petcock. It is on the right side, right lower side of the radiator if you're looking straight at the vehicle, or on the lower left side of the vehicle if you're underneath it. It is on the opposite side of the lower radiator hose. So we need to loosen that, and out of this spout right there, the coolant's gonna come, and if you remove this entirely, the coolant will just come out of both holes. So to regulate flow, we're gonna loosen it and let it flow out of the spout. Now, unfortunately, it looks like the spout leads into this kind of under section. It kind of looks like a frame. It's like a subframe. And it has holes in it too, so just get a bucket ready because the coolant is coming. I eventually just got frustrated with how long it was taking holding the bucket, so I took the petcock out completely. As you can see, the flow is much better. Also be mindful of where you put coolant. It is slightly sweet to the taste, and animals like to drink it. So be really, really careful where you store it. Not around animals, dogs, cats, that kind of thing, because it is poisonous and animals like to drink it. Once all the coolant has drained out, or as much as you're gonna get, slows down to a dribble, or just a couple drops, excuse me. We can reinstall the petcock by hand. And then what I will do is take a standard screwdriver and just twist it a little bit more, not a lot. It's made of plastic, it's brittle, it's fragile, it will crack. And if it's not in good shape and looks cracked, replace it. Other than that, we can move on. Okay, so next I'm going to take off the hose clamp that goes into the thermostat housing. In order to do that easier so you guys can see, I'm going to unplug these plug wires, which you don't need to do, but I'm going to do for you. And if you do the same, the order is 2, 4, 6, like it says here, and they just pull off. And it's still 8 millimeters for the bolt size on the hose clamp. I'm going to get a rag here and stick it underneath. There probably isn't coolant in it, but there might be. So I'm going to go ahead and put a rag there. This might be just a teeny bit left in the thermostat housing. Yeah, that's what I thought. There's even a little bit left in this upper radiator hose. Now I'm going to wipe off the mating surface on the thermostat housing, so it's nice and clean when we reinstall the hose. Oh yeah, it looks great. Can stuff a rag in there, get all the coolant out that we can, and now we can remove the bolts that hold the thermostat housing on. They are two 10 millimeters. Looks like you just need to break them loose and then you can walk them off by hand. There's one, and there's two. Again, it might be a good idea to keep a rag underneath here. I don't know if there's any coolant left in the thermostat housing, but there might be. So with those two bolts removed, we can remove the thermostat housing, and there is the old thermostat. Okay, so I'm on the workbench now. This is our old thermostat inside our housing that we need to remove. There we go. So that's what it looks like when you remove it. And now we can compare it to our new one. The thermostat I'm using today is a Stant or a Super Stant 45209. I will leave a link in the description down below so you can just click on it. Okay, well I opened the box totally wrong. That's okay. So we can compare our old thermostat to our new one. They are pretty much identical, except you might be saying, you know, where is the O-ring? Well, you have to buy that separate, and that's what this is for. I've also left a link down in the description below for this O-ring here. So now we need to replace it. So here's our O-ring, and we need to put this on first before we insert it into our housing. Okay, and it should look like this. Your finished product should look like this. Make sure it is fully seated down on there in that groove. Oh yeah, that looks great. So now we can reinsert it into our thermostat housing. So it does actually matter. Okay, so it matters which way your thermostat goes in. So you can see that the thermostat the spring mechanism is closer down this way than that way. It's offset, and as you can see down in there, there's like a little bite out of this fin here, and that is basically where the thermostat goes, and you can push it back into place. Okay, so that's the thermostat fully seated back in its housing. You gotta remember too, there's gonna be pressure on this side, so it's gonna be pushing this back into the housing, so it's not like this has to be, like if I tugged on this pretty hard, it'd come out, but it's not like it's falling out, see? So that's kind of where you want it. That's what you want right there. Now we can reinstall it. So down there on the thermostat mating surface for the housing, we need to clean that off and make sure it's as clean as possible. Maybe you can get some carburetor spray and clean this surface. Because if it's not as level as it can be, or as clean as it can be, you can get leaks right here, and obviously leaks is something we want to avoid. And now we can reinstall the thermostat housing. Now it doesn't go this way, it goes this way. Remember that tab was facing outward? Of course you do. And we want to be kind of gentle with this when we're reinstalling it. We don't want to bump the thermostat and have it displaced inside the housing. If you're really worried about it, when you're done bolting it out, you can look inside of here with a flashlight and make sure that the thermostat is still seated properly. And now we can tighten those bolts. If I find a torque spec, they will be on screen now. If you don't have a torque wrench, which is understandable, I would say about medium tight. These are kind of small bolts, and you don't want to snap one off, but you also don't want it leaking. So, like forearm, wrist tight. That's good. And I am not tightening these on super tight because they're just little 10mm bolts. You can snap them off easy. There we go, just behind the barb. That looks great. And now we can put the spark plug wires back on. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is place a funnel. No, you do not need this funnel. This is kind of a cool funnel I found on Amazon that would make my life a little easier. I will link to it down below if you want it. It's only $12 and it's made my life a whole heck of a lot easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a coolant until it fills up to here, because obviously there's galleries in the engine. As the thermostat opens up, is going to fill and the level is going to drop. So we're going to keep adding it until it's filled up the radiator completely and the thermostat's open and it's nice and warm. So let's get the coolant. The coolant I'm using today is Walmart SuperTech pre-diluted 50/50 ready to rock. It doesn't need anything super specific or super crazy. This engine doesn't get super hot, and this is going to be good for many miles. You can always kind of judge how much coolant you're going to need by how much coolant you removed. And we removed about 1/5 of a big bucket's worth. So you can kind of judge it off of that. You can even, if you have a couple of these lying around, you can fill them up with your refuse coolant to see how much you have or how much you need. Now, make sure you take your refuse coolant to an EPA approved facility for correct disposal. Do not just dump it down the drain. Now, the reason I really like this funnel is you can kind of put as much as you want in, and even if it ends up being too much, it comes with a cork, and then you can remove this and put it back in the container. I really like this funnel. I can't stress it enough. if it ever broke, I'd need to buy a new one. And if they stopped making them, I'd be heartbroken. I very much enjoy this funnel. So we look down in there, yeah, there's still a lot more room to go. So, time for the second gallon. Okay, so now that it's done kind of blooping up, the air is basically being forced out of the system. What we need to do next is start it and let it run for quite a while until the engine gets warm. Then that thermostat is going to open up and allow more coolant to go inside the engine in different coolant passageways. And this might drop, or don't be alarmed if this raises, because the air inside the engine gets hot and expands, and it pushes the coolant out of the way until it kind of blurps up, and then the coolant will take the air's place. So if this level does rise, don't panic, unless it's going to overflow, obviously. Then maybe cap it off and take it away and try to empty some out. But this is a good place to be. So let's go ahead and start the engine, let it warm up. So as you can see, the coolant level is already dropping in this funnel because the water pump is spinning the coolant through the system and exploring all kinds of different places it couldn't go naturally. So we're going to keep letting this run. Okay, so now that we have let the engine run for quite some time, all of the coolant galleries have been filled out, which is good. And now we can remove our funnel. And now we just put it right back in the container. That's nice. And again, my funnel solution is optional. You can just use a regular funnel if you want. So now you see down in there, you can see that there's coolant right there, which is what you want. Now here's another cool tech tip for you. While you're here, go ahead and replace the radiator cap with a new one. It's just a good idea to replace your radiator cap frequently, because if this can't regulate pressure, no matter what you do, you will overheat. So just get a new radiator cap. They're a couple dollars and they will save you from a roadside headache. Make sure this is on nice and tight, which it is, and we can move on to the reservoir tank now. Now, the reservoir tank is insanely hard to see from the camera, but it's really easy in person. Way down here is where it says minimum, and up here is where it says maximum. So you kind of want to be somewhere in the middle there. This part isn't actually super critical, but we're going to fill it to we're somewhere in the middle between minimum and maximum. Now, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the level I put it at is right about there, right at the end of my fingertip there, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there because I want it to have a little bit of leeway when it comes to pressure building up, because if you fill it up too much, it's just going to go out here on this spout and spray all over everything. So I'm going to give it a little bit of leeway room. And then of course, we're going to put the cap back on, and we put the cap back on for the reservoir. Here we go, all fixed. So that's how to change your thermostat in your 2008 Dodge Caravan with a 3.3 liter V6. Thank you so much for watching. All applicable links are down below in the description, and I'll catch you next time.